Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Antony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
Brought to you by the good people at CACI, the Center for American Culture and Ideas. Ant, what's new and exciting in your world this week?
I ran across an article that reminded me of something I used to talk about when I taught game theory. The thing I used to talk about was an economic paper written, and I should have the name, Gary Becker, Nobel Prize winner. He took the process of finding a mate, someone to marry, and applied game theory analytics to it, and came to the conclusion, and this was the paper, look, here's what you need to do is you go out and you start dating people, and you're dating somebody, look for somebody else, you find somebody who's better, ditch the first person, start dating the second. And keep on doing that. Keep looking, you find someone better, ditch the old guy, go with the new one. And keep doing that until you reach, and what was it? He said, I'm going to do this off the top of my head. At the outset, you say, I want to be married no later than age X. And he says, keep on doing this process till you get 1/3 the way to age X. Then whoever you're dating at that point, that's it. Marry that person. This is a game theory thing. Now, I bring this up because I ran across, just a couple days ago, an article saying, are you struggling over a big life decision? Math says you should use the 37% rule. And the 37% rule is that same thing. So he's talking here, one of the examples is hiring someone, you're interviewing people. So you interview, you find somebody who's good, put him top of the list, and then find someone who's better, put him on top of that guy, and keep on going till you've gone through 37% of the applicants. Whoever you end up with, that's the person. You're done.
Is it my turn now? Can I tell you all the reasons? Well, the one reason why that's completely misguided and wrong?
You tell me.
People lie all the time. All the time. That's all they do. They lie and lie and lie and lie. And when you're dating someone, you haven't met that person yet. You've met their representative. You meet that person after you get married.
Yeah, but that's going to be true of all of the people. So in that sense, they're the same.
Nope, the representation is radically different. Some representatives are really good. Some are very close to the actual person. Some are very widely from the actual person. And there's no way to know unless you can peer into a person's soul. So I think, you know who's got it right? The arranged marriage people. Just have your parents decide for you.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for that.
Considering that they divorce at a lower rate than the chosen marriage people do, It's not a bad idea.
But all of this falls under a larger heading of there are, we know this in nature, phenomena that follow known statistical distributions. So distribution of heights and IQs and on and on and on. But in the social sciences, things also follow known distributions. For example, someone was talking to me the other day and getting all bent out of shape that 50% of consumption spending in this country is due to the top 10% of people in terms of how much they spend. And I'm thinking about this and I'm thinking that sounds about right. And I started looking to other things, and sure enough, you find the same phenomenon if you look not at individuals, but states. The top 10%, it's a little bit more than top 10%, maybe the top 15% of states account for 50% of GDP. If you look at greenhouse gas emissions, it's the same thing. The top 10% emitters account for about 50%. And my reaction to all of that is here, like with the marriage, the 37% rule, it's a phenomenon that follows this known distribution. And there's no point in getting bent out of shape about the top 10% having 50% of the consumption. That's just the way it falls. It's got nothing to do with inequality or policy or anything else. It's just the phenomenon.
Well, this week maybe you'll be the one getting the hate mail. Anyway, do you remember the good old days, Ant, when you and I used to look at each other on Skype?
I heard Skype is going away.
It's going away.
It's about time. It should have gone away 20 years ago.
Why did we stop using Skype? Well, because Microsoft bought it and ruined it.
Yes.
And now Microsoft is finally putting it out to pasture.
I heard that it's putting it out to pasture, but it's coming up with some alternative. Oh, it's Teams. It's trying to push Teams.
Teams. Yeah, that other thing that nobody wants to use.
I use Teams a lot. And I have to tell you, in terms of communication, I would say it's as good as Zoom. But what Microsoft pushes is that it integrates with Word and PowerPoint and Excel and all of that stuff. If that were true, Teams would be really cool. In fact, it integrates kind of. So if you're a power user of any of those pieces of software, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, you'll find that the Teams version doesn't do all the things, which is astounding to me because the entire suite, all of that, are Microsoft products. If you can't get your own software to talk to your own software, you've got a serious problem.
Well, this is just, I don't even know where to begin on the category of serious problems for Microsoft, so I guess we'll just leave it there. But rest in peace, Skype. On to Zoom, like we all were, 7, 8 years ago now, and to hell with all of it.
Well, for me, it was the biggest plus of COVID, is that it forced everybody to use Zoom.
But you know what angers me, Ant? Skype was a great thing because everybody had their contact list, which they would text to, and then they would go ahead and click the video meeting when they wanted to make a call. Zoom has exactly that capability, and yet no one will text on Zoom. I have no idea why the resistance, but there we go. It was sitting right there for all of us to use, and then we decided not to. So we have to go through this idiocy of sending links to people so we can have a video chat.
Do you use WhatsApp?
Not really, no.
I discovered this when we were in Spain. Apparently it's a thing that all the Europeans use it, which currently the college age and high school age generations in this country are using it.
Yeah, all the scammers love it too, which is why I bailed out of it.
Yeah, but it does that. It does the text and the video thing.
Yeah. I bailed out 20 minutes after I started because of all the scammers that just, for some reason, were able to find me the needle in the proverbial haystack. But so it goes. Which, of course, brings us to the foolishness of the week, which is going to get, I think, to something you really like to talk about a lot in my home state of Connecticut, the once great state of Connecticut. A young woman, her name is Alicia Ortiz, managed to graduate high school and get herself a scholarship to college. Now, let's not lose our minds. The scholarship was to the University of Connecticut, Hartford, which, all right, we're not all going to do a dance around the maypole over that. But what makes this an interesting case is that Ms. Ortiz is illiterate. She can neither read nor write. And yet she graduated high school with honors and got herself a scholarship to the State University in Connecticut.
My God.
Yeah. Go ahead, take a guess how she pulled this off.
I hate to say it, but she's got to be a member of a favored class.
Yeah, I don't think that really matters.
Don't tell me. It can't be AI. If she can't read and write, she can't interact with an AI.
Text to speech and speech to text.
Wow.
My mind went immediately to my old math teachers saying things like, well, you're not going to be able to carry a calculator with you everywhere you go. Meanwhile, now we all do. Well, what are we going to tell people like this? You can't just carry text to speech everywhere you go. Of course you can.
You can, but it raises the question, if we were going to accept that, why would any of us write? I mean, why do text to speech if everybody can't read and write? If other people can't read and write, I should say.
Why go to school at all?
Right, yeah.
I mean, bring it right down to the love brass tacks. For the love of God, this is the foolishness of all time.
Wow.
Yeah, wow is right. Think about what she had to outdo to become the foolishness of the week.
See, now, just before we started recording, I said, we need to do an episode on what's going on in higher education. You said, that's not very interesting. But look at this.
And now we're done with this, because what more can be said?
For one-stop shopping for all things James and Ant, visit our website, wordsandnumbers.org. We give a special shout-out to our Patreon sponsors who help us keep the lights on. If you'd like to contribute, go to patreon.com/wordsandnumbers.
Before we get started on the main episode this week, though, Ann, I have a quick question for you that I suspect any number of our listeners might have as well. Do you remember the good old days when we said things like the Social Security trustees say that Social Security will be bankrupt or will run out of funds by 20? Well, that's not even right either. How did they put it? Funds will be depleted by 2026. Do you remember when they used to say that?
Yeah.
Well, that's next year. And lo and behold, they don't say that anymore. Now they say 2035.
No, I don't ever recall them saying 2026. I think 2035 has always been the number, plus or minus a little bit. I mean, unless you're going back 20 years and I'm not recalling.
I just seem to remember that you and I were working with a number in 2026.
I have to go back and look at what they were saying 20 years ago.
Let's go back and take a look. It might be worth it. But anyway, enough for my random questions for one day.
Well, but hang on. This is a point worth making because you and I have said this before, and other people have taken issue saying this is incorrect because Social Security says they'll be able to pay 75 cents out of every dollar that they owe. And we said, no, that's by definition what happens when you're insolvent. You can't make your full commitment. The fact that you can make 75% of it is irrelevant. You can't make your full commitment. Therefore, you are insolvent. And indeed, that's what Social Security says.
And well, the number these days, they say they can make 83%.
Really?
As of 2035. But let's take a deep breath and remember this thing, inflation. Because that erodes the value of those dollars. You're not going to get 83% of the purchasing power, even if you get 83% of the dollars.
No.
This is a train wreck waiting to happen, and it will happen.
Well, you know that it's every May that Social Security Board of Trustees comes out with their annual report. So that's just a couple months off. We should keep our eye out for it and give it a serious treatment come May.
Are they going to have anybody left there to do the work?
That's a very good question. They may not come out with it this year.
I've been watching, the weathermen are all worried now because they don't know where they'll get their weather alerts from because everybody at the federal level in the government's been fired. The federal parks are all in various stages of disrepair because all the park rangers have been fired. Who else is going to get fired?
Well, it's interesting. I'm here in the outskirts of Washington, D.C., and there's apparently record number of houses up for sale as people are looking to move out. And I have to say, I would not wish job loss on anyone. So understand that going in. However, it is the case, and I have observed this going back a couple of decades, that the Washington, D.C. area has been recession-proof. In the height of the 2008 housing crisis, when the rest of the country, it took us about 10 years to come out of that. The rest of the country's in serious recession. There's a housing boom going on here in D.C. Why? Because you're guaranteed your income. The federal workers, they're never fired. They're guaranteed the paycheck, the whole business. And again, I don't wish ill on anyone, but for the first time, they're feeling what the rest of America lives with all the time.
Yeah. Well, when 7 of the top 10 counties in terms of affluence are within a spitting distance of Washington, D.C., you can see the problem. If you've got a brain in your head and eyes, you can see the problem. And people often say, or they say now, well, you can't be heartless. All these people are going to be out of jobs. I get it. But where was the concern when they were being paid out of my pocket?
Right. Yeah.
Nobody took any great concern for the level of taxation which led to this problem. And here we are. I've got no dog in the hunt. I think everybody's guilty. But you and I are going to be talking about this for the next 2 years, I would assume.
Did you see a number? I could have sworn that recently I ran across something that said even if Doge gets its pie in the sky results in terms of layoffs, that it's only something like 6% of the federal workforce.
I don't see a way in hell that anybody can balance the budget as things now stand. I'm taking bets on it. As you well know, you probably saw this on Facebook. If you think the budget will be balanced next year, bring your money over here.
Yep.
Ant will hold the cash when we wait for the results.
Yep.
Because that dirtbag Mike Schneider never paid up on the election. And I'm going to keep.
You are still salty about that.
I am so salty about it. I will be talking about this as they take the IV out of my arm when they finally give up on me. But anyway.
So this week, we're going to talk about the consumer blackout. I didn't even know this was a thing until it inundated my Facebook feed. Everybody's saying, well, don't buy from these places. And I was talking to my wife. Apparently, there's a blacklist of it's specifically businesses that have taken down their DEI policies off their websites.
Well, now I want to go spend more money at those places, but we'll get to that later. For now, I didn't even find out about this until the day after it allegedly happened.
Oh, did it happen in the past? I thought it was happening like this week or something.
No, I believe it was yesterday.
Okay.
I should tell the nice people we are recording on March 1, and I believe this was on February 28. I became convinced it was on February 28 so they could point to January and say, look how much sales were down.
Yeah.
Because there's 10% fewer sales days in February than there are in January. Right. But then I thought to myself, these morons can't read data.
Well, the thing is, and this whole business reminded me of the cash for clunkers. You remember that back in, good Lord, whenever?
I do.
Wow, that would have been like 2001, 2002.
Was it that? No,
I think it was a response. Yes, it was a response to 9/11. Because it was under George Bush. After 9/11, there was a recession. It was short-lived. And they did this cash for clunkers thing. The government would subsidize if you traded in your older car for a new car, and there was some government subsidization going on there.
This is incorrect. We're going to get a lot of mail on this. It was 2009.
Oh, was it? Okay.
It was in response to the housing fiasco
crash.
And everybody's underwater on everything. So let's get everybody buying more cars.
Okay. Well, I've got it associated in my mind with George Bush, so it must have been the tail end of his presidency.
No, this was Obama.
Was it really? Okay. Wow, I'm completely off base in the whole thing there. Well, here's what happened. The government said you trade in your old car for a new car, and they made some noise about, well, this is good for the environment because the older cars are less environmentally friendly, all this stuff. But you trade it in, and the government will kick in some cash as well. There was a window for this. It was like several months' time. As I recall, it was in the fall of whatever year that was. And I said at the time, you watch what happens. This is not going to have any effect on the total number of cars sold long term. All that's going to happen is people who were planning on buying a car 6 months in the future are going to buy it now instead to take care of cash for clunkers. And sure enough, if you look at the data, during cash for clunkers, huge uptick in car sales. When cash for clunkers was done, huge downtick in car sales. And when you put it all together, the total sales, no different than the year before.
Yeah, that sounds exactly right, though, doesn't it? Because if you can't afford a car, you're not going to buy a car.
Right.
They can fiddle around at the margins all they want, but unless they're going to come up with like 80% of the value of a car, I'm not buying a car.
Yeah, throwing a couple thousand on the table isn't going to change anything, especially when you're talking about a new car.
You're looking at roughly $30,000 to $40,000 of an outlay. Well, a couple grand isn't going to really make that much of a difference. If you're going to buy one in August, you'll sure as hell buy one in June.
Yeah, that's right.
You'd be a crazy person not to. But, I want to get back to this idea that people can make some sort of grand gesture with a day of boycotting. And, you start to think about this, and I want you to really think about this, Ant. Name for me the boycotts that have ever worked. And let's stick with America. Let's stick with the U.S.
Yeah, I don't know of any. That's not to say there aren't. I just don't know of any.
Only two came to mind off the top of my head. The Montgomery bus boycott back in the 1950s, before we were born, right in the Civil Rights era, and the Bud Light fiasco.
I don't recall the Bud Light fiasco.
When Bud Light hired Dylan Mulvaney, who was either a man or a woman, depending on how you look at things, to be their spokesman, and all the good old boys who drank various Anheuser-Busch products decided they weren't going to buy that anymore.
No, I wasn't aware of that.
And sometime later, Anheuser-Busch started hiring country music singers to, support the brand again. So those are the only two things that I came up with. Now, apparently in 1988, there was a tuna boycott that was pretty successful. And I remembered this, but only after I read about it. Remember back in the late 80s when everybody lost their minds because porpoises were being caught in the tuna nets?
Right. Yep.
For some reason, we could eat tuna but not porpoises. Mm-hmm. I never really understood the differentiation there. For whatever the reason, that was what people decided. And a boycott on tuna really got off the ground until they came up with new ways of catching tuna.
Right, yeah. And now then they advertised it as porpoise safe or dolphin safe or whatever it was. Yeah.
Yep, that's right. Dolphin safe tuna. You can buy it in the store. And apparently people still do care about that. And that boycott actually did accomplish something. So I don't want to say that boycotts never accomplish anything because we have a few counterexamples right here. And there were one or two more that I read about when I was thinking about this that I thought, okay, that's interesting. It was a meat boycott in the 1970s and, these sorts of things. You really think Target's going to feel the heat because a bunch of people decided not to go there on February 28th?
Well, yeah, see, and I think that's the thing. There are a couple of things that make the boycott work in the case of Bud Light and tuna, neither one of which are at play here. One of them is that it's an ongoing thing. So you say, look, we're not going to buy tuna until.
That's right. It has to be prolonged.
It has to be prolonged, and there has to be an alternative. So you can't say, for example, we're going to boycott the gas stations. I'm sorry, most people don't have an alternative to that. You got to buy gas. And the question is where. So there's got to be alternatives. To do a boycott for one day is ridiculous. All that's going to happen is people are going to shift their spending. So the stuff they were going to buy on Monday, they can't because it's a boycott. Fine, I'll buy it on Tuesday.
I'm just astonished that anybody thinks this is going to work at all. I don't even think that you're going to have a dip on the sales that one day. Mm-hmm. And here we get, I think, to the larger issue of people who live in ideological bubbles. I think, yeah, you can tune into Facebook and Twitter and see a bunch of crackpots saying, oh, I don't like this policy from Target. I'm not going there on February 28th. I don't care. If I need to buy something at Target, that's where I'm going. I don't care what your cause is. I don't care about the pro-DEI people any more than I cared about the anti-gay people who pulled this same nonsense with Target and other places not too terribly long ago.
Let me say something in defense of this, because as a free marketer, I say this is exactly the way it's supposed to work. If you're dissatisfied with the company for whatever reason, stop buying from it. We say this all the time. My complaint is the way they're going about it isn't going to achieve anything.
But listen to what you just said, because you're exactly right. If you're dissatisfied, then you shouldn't shop there. And if enough people are dissatisfied, then something will give.
Yep.
But the moral preening and the grandstanding, it's just ridiculous.
Right. Yeah.
Everybody wants to be on the right side of whatever today's idiotic cause du jour is. 5 years from now, everybody's going to look back and say, what was the problem again? Because they won't remember, because there wasn't one.
I'll give you an example about the preening. So apparently how your company gets on this list to be banned or boycotted rather is that you remove your DEI policy from your webpage. That's how people are identifying these. And Aldi, one of my wife's favorite stores, was on this list. And people saying, boycott Aldi. Until somebody pointed out, wait a minute, Aldi redesigned its entire website. Its DEI policy is still there. It's just not where it was before. But somebody went along and looked and said, well, I don't see it, therefore put Aldi on the list.
I remember back in the good old days when I was working at the group homes. You may find this hard to believe, Ant, but there's not a lot of reactionary conservatives working in the group homes. And I was out with a coworker who had just moved into the state, and I was showing him around. Stopped at a gas station because I was parched, as I often am, and I bought a Snapple. And he said, oh, you can't buy Snapple. I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure I just did. But they support pro-life causes. I said, who gives a They make great tea.
Right. Yeah.
And he looked at me and I said, I buy Ben & Jerry's ice cream, even though those commies do all kinds of things with the money that I would prefer they not do. But my love of the ice cream outweighs my distaste with what they're going to do with the cash. So too the Snapple, right? I buy what I buy because I like what I like. And I can imagine a case in which I wouldn't buy a product. Mm-hmm. But those two don't even come close.
Yeah. My favorite example of this, it worked so well, the boycott wasn't even necessary. And I forget the woman's name, you may well do. This was back in the days of Rush Limbaugh's, whatever it was, radio program, TV program. I guess it was radio.
Oh, God, I can't remember her name.
Rush Limbaugh called out some woman and called her a horrible name on his program. And there was a huge outcry of people, saying, no, you can't say this. I forget all the details of the thing, but, people were incensed. And what happened was, within 24 hours, Rush Limbaugh issued an apology. So he backstepped on the whole thing. And what was fascinating is how it happened that nobody boycotted. It was simply the threat, what might come to be a boycott. His advertisers were afraid of this. They contacted him and said, look, you either have to walk this back or else we're withdrawing our advertising money.
And look, I wouldn't advertise on his show if he was offending on a regular basis half or so of the people in the United States. Why on earth as a business would I want to do that? As a matter of fact, as a business, I want to remain as politically neutral as is humanly possible.
Right.
I want to be neither for nor against any political thing. What I want is for lots and lots of people to come to my store and buy things. Mm-hmm. Just as many as I can get. And I don't care if you're a Trump person or a Kamala Biden person. Are you a dollar-owning person?
That's right. Are you bringing dollars?
That's the important part if you're running a business. But, we've gotten to the point now where people have to infuse everything with their goofy ideology. I mean, no matter what. And, we've got all kinds of silly words that we use to describe all of this, but let's just call it what it is. This is idiocy. And people should just knock it off. And as you said, if you don't like that they removed DEI policies from their websites, and here I am saying, hip, hip, hooray, let's get rid of all, and I mean all, the other DEI policies across the fruited plain, because this is a pernicious thing, right? And we could do a future episode on all the reasons why. This is just a terrible idea. But hey, finally, people are saying, okay, enough. And they're getting rid of these things. Well, let's get back to business as usual. But should business have ever involved itself with this nonsense in the first place? And the reason why businesses did was because they feared losing the business of the American left.
Right. Yeah.
What you're going to end up with here is a pendulum that keeps swinging. So it's probably going to swing too far to the other side right now. How about that, just a few months after the inauguration? And then it's probably going to swing a little too far back the other way when I'm here to tell you it's going to happen about 3 months before the midterm elections.
You think so?
Put it in the bank. That's when it's going to happen. And so on and so forth until the end of all time. Well, the only way to win this game, getting all the way back to a movie we both loved, I'm quite sure, is not to play. Mm-hmm. Don't play this game with people, because really, you can be a decent human being. It doesn't take much. It really doesn't. Just go do the right thing. And that doesn't mean you have to lean all over everybody else all the time because you're not quite sure they're 100% pure on your issue.
And that's all the time we've got this week on Words and Numbers. Until next time,
send us email, wordsandnumberspodcast@gmail.com.
Try to be nice to one person who doesn't deserve it. Till next week, can't take it easy.
See you next week, James.